Picture this. It is a crisp, clear spring morning.
Hmm.
You are standing on the rooftop of a high-rise in downtown Dallas, North Texas.
Okay, I can feel that. You can feel that little bit of humidity in the air.
Exactly, that promise of heat that's coming later in the day. But for now, it's perfect.
Right.
You look out over the city and you're expecting to see the usual grind, you know?
Gridlock.
Yeah.
The sea of red brake lights on the highway.
The sea of red brake lights, that's the perfect phrase for it. The heat shimmering off the asphalt, that's the morning commute we all know.
And dread.
And dread. But instead, you look up, and there, buzzing between the skyscrapers, are flying taxis.
Wow. Okay.
They're distinct. They're quieter than helicopters, moving with this different kind of purpose.
Not that loud thumping sound.
Yeah.
Something sleeker.
Yes, exactly. They're silently picking up commuters for these aerial rides across the whole Metroplex, just hopping from rooftop to rooftop.
It feels like a scene straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Doesn't it? I mean, I'm thinking Blade Runner or The Fifth Element.
It does sound like science fiction, and honestly, for most of us, it feels decades away.
It does.
But what is fascinating and, a bit terrifying is that for city planners in North Texas, this isn't a movie script.
Right.
It isn't a someday project. It's a very real, very immediate administrative challenge.
I mean, a few years ago, a major rideshare company actually announced plans for an urban air mobility network right there in that region.
And that's a huge wake-up call.
A massive one. I mean, imagine being a local official. You go into work thinking your biggest headache for the day is fixing potholes on Main Street.
Or just retiming the traffic lights on I-35, which is a nightmare in itself.
Right. And then suddenly you are staring at a future that hasn't even happened yet. They had to start asking these huge questions.
Like, will these airborne vehicles actually solve our traffic problems?
Or are we just trading one nightmare for another?
A nightmare of noise pollution, air traffic chaos, safety hazards. I mean, the list goes on.
It's the classic innovator's dilemma, but it's applied to, like, city management.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this quote from the mayor of Dallas at the time, Mayor Rawlings. He just summed up this anxiety so perfectly.
What did he say?
He said, "Anytime there's innovation in the marketplace, I don't think anybody truly knows the results of these things. We've got to be multimodal."
Multimodal. It's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it?
It is a bit of a buzzword, but I think he's getting at something deeper. It captures the necessity of having options.
He's saying you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Not the car basket. Not the flying taxi basket.
Right. And it raises the big question we are tackling in this deep dive. How do you plan for a future that is fundamentally uncertain?
How do you prepare your business, your city, or even your own career for flying cars when you are still busy trying to fix the potholes on the ground?
That is the million-dollar question.
Or in this context, probably the billion-dollar question.
Welcome to the Emerging Technologies Podcast. I'm your host, here to take you on a deep dive into the ideas shaping our digital era.
And we are broadcasting especially for the students of Tarleton State University's Dr. Sam Pack College of Business.
But also for any curious minds out there who want to understand where the world is headed.
And I'm here to help unpack the theories and, the actual tools that can make sense of all that chaos. We aren't just reading the news today.
No.
We're looking at the mechanics of how decisions get made.
Now, before we launch into today's deep dive, I have a very specific ask for you. Yes, you, listening right now.
Quick favor.
A quick favor. I want you to take just a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the show, and then share this deep dive with a classmate or a colleague.
Seriously, it makes a huge difference.
It really does. We are dropping insider tips that are going to be crucial for your career, and you do not want to miss the next one.
Absolutely. The landscape is changing so fast, and we want you to be part of the conversation.
Also, check the description. We've got links to the textbook chapter we're discussing today, along with some white papers we'll be referencing.
It's a gold mine of resources if you want to go even deeper.
It really is. So, lay it out for us. What is on the docket today?
Today, we are cracking open Chapter 10, Forecasting and Foresight, Methods for Anticipating Change.
Okay.
This comes from the text Emerging Technologies and Innovation Strategy, an Information Systems Approach for the Digital Era by Dr. Joseph H.Schuessler. It was released in 2026.
2026, so this is absolutely cutting edge.
It is, and this is such a pivotal chapter because it challenges a really fundamental human instinct.
Which is?
We all want to know the future. We all want a crystal ball.
I know I do.
But this chapter says, stop looking for the crystal ball. It doesn't exist.
Okay, so if we can't have a crystal ball, what do we get instead?
We get legitimate business tools.
Yeah.
We're looking at forecasting, scenario planning, trend analysis, and systems thinking.
Got it.
These are the actual methodologies that separate the companies that just react frantically to change.
From the leaders who proactively shape it.
Exactly.
So our mission today is pretty simple then. We want to move from trying to be right about the future.
Which is like trying to predict the winning lottery numbers.
Right. Impossible. And move towards being ready for whatever happens.
Precisely. The whole deep dive is about moving from prediction to preparation.
Love that. Okay, let's unpack this. Section 1 you mentioned involves a major mindset shift.
It does.
We need to talk about the difference between forecasting and foresight. But first, you said we have to define the landscape we're living in.
Right.
You used an acronym earlier, VUCA. It sounds like a villain from a Marvel movie. Break that down for us.
It does sound a bit ominous, doesn't it? VUCA. It stands for Volatile, Uncertain, Complex, and Ambiguous.
Okay.
The acronym actually came out of the U.S. military originally. It was used to describe the fog of war.
No, that makes sense.
But it is the perfect description of the modern digital business environment.
Let's go letter by letter then, because I think people sometimes gloss over these terms. Volatile, that's not just changing, is it?
No, that's a great point. Volatility means the speed and the magnitude of change.
Speed and magnitude.
It's not just that things change. It's that they can change overnight, dramatically. Think of the stock market during a crash.
Or how a single tweet can tank a company's reputation in an hour.
That is volatility. It's the instability of the whole situation.
Okay, so that's V. What about you? Uncertainty.
Uncertainty means you lack the ability to predict the outcome. It's not that you don't have data.
Right.
It's that the past is no longer a reliable predictor of the future. You don't know if a competitor is going to launch a product that makes yours totally obsolete.
You know the variables, maybe, but you don't know what the values are going to be.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, next is C, complexity.
Complexity refers to the sheer number of factors involved. In the old days, maybe you had one main competitor and two suppliers. Simple. Now you have global supply chains, you have regulatory bodies in 50 different countries, and you have technology stacks that interact in ways that, frankly, nobody fully understands.
It's a web, not a straight line.
It's a massive web. There are just too many moving parts to control.
All right, and finally, A for ambiguity. This is the one that I think trips people up. How is that different from uncertainty?
It's a subtle but really important difference. Uncertainty is, I don't know what will happen.
Okay.
Ambiguity is, I see what's happening, but I don't know what it means.
It's about interpretation.
It's all about interpretation. The data you have could be interpreted in 5 completely different valid ways. Is a drop in sales because your product is bad?
Or because the economy is bad. Or because a cultural trend just shifted.
Exactly. It's fuzzy. It's the fog in the fog of war.
So in a VUCA, world volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, doing things the old way, it just doesn't cut it. You can't just draw a straight line on a graph and call it a day.
Exactly. The traditional methods fail because they assume a level of stability that just doesn't exist anymore.
Which brings us to the core distinction here.
Yes, between forecasting and strategic foresight. Most people use these terms interchangeably. I hear it in boardrooms all the time.
I do too.
But they're very, very distinct disciplines.
Okay, so distinguish them for us. Let's start with forecasting. What is it in this specific context?
Forecasting is typically quantitative. It's about predicting specific metrics based on past data.
Okay, give me an example.
If you're trying to predict the market size for smartphones next year, you look at sales from the last 5 years, you calculate the growth rate, and you just draw a line extending into the future.
So it's very mathematical.
Very. And it has a core assumption that the future will look roughly like the past, just, more so.
It's like driving while looking only in the rearview mirror. You're assuming the road ahead is perfectly straight because the road behind you is straight.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And, to be fair to forecasting, that works just fine on a long, straight highway in Kansas.
Sure.
If you're selling something stable like toilet paper, demand is relatively predictable. Forecasting works. But if there's a cliff coming up, or a sharp turn, or if the road suddenly disappears entirely, which happens in technology all the time,
then looking in the rearview mirror is going to get you killed.
it is. And that is where strategic foresight comes in.
So foresight isn't about trying to predict the one correct future.
No, not at all. Foresight is about envisioning multiple plausible futures.
Plausible, not just possible.
The key distinction. It admits that we don't know where the road goes. So it asks, what if the road turns hard left? What if it turns right? What if it becomes a dirt path and we have to go off-road.
It's about preparation then, not prediction.
That's the mantra. Preparation over prediction.
You know, there's a quote in the source material from Paul Sappho. He's a well-known futurist. That really struck me.
I think I know the one you mean.
He said, "The goal of forecasting is not to predict the future, but to tell you what you need to know to take meaningful action in the present."
That is the aha moment for so many students when they read this chapter.
It really changes the pressure, doesn't it? It means you don't have to be Nostradamus.
No.
You don't have to pinpoint the exact date the flying taxis arrive. You just need to test if your current strategy survives if they arrive.
Or if they don't arrive. Or if they arrive but are immediately banned by the government for being too loud.
Right.
The shift is entirely mental. You stop asking what will happen, which is a very passive stance, and you start asking what could happen and am I ready for it?
Which is active, proactive.
Exactly.
Let's look at the gold standard for this. The source material tells the story of Royal Dutch Shell in the late 1960s.
Ah, yes.
This is a classic business school case study, but I think it's so relevant to the flying car problem we started with.
It is the definitive case for why this kind of thinking matters. So let's set the scene.
Please.
It's the late 60s, early 70s. The oil industry is booming. It's incredibly stable.
Everything is great.
Everything's great. Oil is cheap. The supply from the Middle East is consistent, and demand is just growing in a nice, straight, predictable line.
So every major oil company is using traditional forecasting.
Every single one.
Yeah.
They look at the past, they see stability, and they predict more stability.
They're all driving with that rear view mirror. They're betting the entire house that the straight road is going to continue forever.
Exactly. But Shell was different. They had this group called the Long Range Planning Unit, led by a guy named Pierre Wack.
Okay.
And these planners, they realized that focusing on a single forecast was just incredibly dangerous.
They saw the risk.
They did. They looked at the geopolitical landscape, specifically what was happening in the Middle East, and they started asking the really uncomfortable what-if questions. Such as, what if the oil supply from the Middle East isn't stable? What if the producing nations unite and decide to cut us off?
Which, at the time, probably seemed like a crazy conspiracy theory to the other executives.
Oh, absolutely. It seemed radical. It went against all the data they had on paper. It went against decades of history.
But Sheldon just asked the question.
No, and this is the key part. They rehearsed that future. They built a detailed scenario they called oil shock.
Okay.
They walked through the implications step by step. If supply is cut, what happens to the price?
It spikes.
It spikes. If the price spikes, what happens to consumer demand?
It drops. People drive less.
It drops. So then what do we do with our massive refineries that are built for high volume? What happens to our long-term shipping contracts? They played the entire war game.
And then history happened.
1973, the Yom Kippur War, the OPEC oil embargo, the oil shock scenario that was just a story in a binder, it became reality overnight.
And for everyone else, Exxon, Mobil, all the rest, it was complete chaos.
Absolute chaos, total panic. Prices spiked fourfold in a matter of weeks. Shell's competitors were blinded.
Paralyzed.
Completely paralyzed because their entire business model was effectively hardwired for cheap, abundant oil. They had no plan B.
But
Shell had already lived through this crisis in their simulation. They had the playbook written and waiting.
So they didn't have to waste time arguing about what to do. They just opened the binder and started executing.
They moved faster than anyone. They immediately adjusted their refining mix to handle different types of crude oil. They changed their investment strategy away from energy-intensive projects.
And that foresight gave them a massive competitive advantage.
Massive. It effectively vaccinated the organization against surprise.
I love that phrasing, vaccinated against surprise. That is a huge takeaway for the students listening.
It is.
Foresight isn't just about being smart or visionary. It's a competitive moat. It protects you when the market inevitably goes sideways.
And in a VUCA world, the market always goes sideways eventually.
So Shell used a method called scenario planning. That leads us perfectly into section 2 of our deep dive.
Let's do it.
Let's break this method down because it sounds great in theory, but how does it actually work in practice? The text describes scenario planning as a flight simulator for decision makers.
That is the best way to visualize it. Think about how you train a pilot.
Okay.
You don't just put them in a real 747 on day one, point it at the sky, and just hope for sunny weather.
No, that would be a disaster.
You put them in a simulator first, and then you throw engine fires at them. You make the hydraulics fail. You make them try to land in a hurricane with crosswinds.
You make them crash.
You make them crash in the simulation so that they don't crash in real life.
And that's what we are doing with business strategy. We are crashing the company in a safe environment, a conference room, to see where the weak points are before they break in the real world.
Exactly. We are stress testing the strategy against different possible futures.
And I think we need to clarify this again.
Yes.
Scenarios are not predictions. We aren't saying this world will happen.
No, that's a critical point. We are using them as learning tools to ask what if.
Okay, let's get practical. If I'm a student listening to this, or a manager at a company, how do I actually do this? I can't just sit in a room and daydream.
No, it's a structured process. The source outlines it step by step.
Walk us through it with step one.
Step one is situational analysis. You have to scan the environment to see what is actually changing out there.
And for that, we use another acronym.
We do. We use the acronym STEEP.
STEP. Okay, break it down for us.
It stands for Social, Technological, Economic, Environmental, and Political Drivers of Change.
So you scan these 5 big areas.
You do. So if we go back to our flying taxi example, socially, you'd ask, are people actually willing to get in a drone with no pilot?
That's a huge psychological barrier.
Huge. Technologically.
Yeah.
Do the batteries last long enough to make the trip from Dallas to Fort Worth? Economically? Is this affordable for a normal commuter, or is it just a toy for billionaires?
Right. Environmental? Is it green, or is it just as loud as a helicopter? And political.
Will the city zoning laws even allow a landing pad on every single roof? Will the FAA approve it?
Okay, so you gather all these drivers, but if I list every possible change in those 5 categories, I'm going to have a list of 1,000 things. You can't plan for everything.
Right, and that's paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
So that brings us to step 2, identifying drivers.
You have to narrow it down.
You have to. And you're looking for drivers that meet 2 very specific criteria. They have to be high impact and high uncertainty.
High uncertainty is the key there, isn't it?
It is.
Because if we know for a fact something is going to happen, we don't need a scenario for it.
Exactly. If we know the population is aging, that's a trend, not an uncertainty. That demographic shift goes in all your scenarios. You just bake it in.
But the things you don't know.
The things you don't know are the pivot points. Will the government ban gas cars in 2030 or 2050? Will battery technology have a major breakthrough, or will it just stall out? That's an uncertainty.
Got it. So you pick your top 2 uncertainties, the 2 things that keep you up at night. And this leads to step 3, the matrix framework.
This is where you get to draw. You imagine a simple 2x2 matrix, just a big plus sign on a piece of paper or a whiteboard.
So you get 4 quadrants.
4 quadrants.
Right.
The vertical axis is one of your big uncertainties, and the horizontal axis is the other.
The text gives a really clear example using the electric vehicle industry. Let's walk through that one.
Perfect. Let's say our x-axis, that's the horizontal line, is global environmental policy.
Okay.
On the far left side, you write lax policy. This means governments don't really care, there's no carbon tax, it's business as usual.
And on the far right side?
Aggressive policy. This means strict mandates, maybe outright bans on new gas cars.
Okay. So we have a spectrum of government intervention. What about the y-axis, the vertical one?
The y-axis is battery technology. At the bottom, you write stagnant. This means the tech improves slowly, range is still limited, costs are high.
That at the top.
At the top, revolutionary breakthrough. Imagine solid-state batteries are invented, you get a 1,000-mile range, and they're super cheap to make.
So now we have 4 very distinct worlds. Let's visit them, because this is the fun part.
It is.
Start with the top right quadrant. That's aggressive policy plus revolutionary tech.
That's the tech leap under green rules world.
Right.
This is basically a green utopia for EV makers.
Right. The cars are cheap, they perform better than gas cars, and the government is forcing everyone to buy them.
If you are an automaker in this world, your strategy is simple. Build as many EVs as you can, as fast as you can. It's a land grab.
Okay, now go to the complete opposite. Bottom left. Lax policy and stagnant tech.
That's the stagnation world. Here, gas cars stay king. EVs remain a niche product, a little toy for the rich or the super eco-conscious.
And if you're an automaker who bet the whole company on EVs in this world,
You go bankrupt. If you converted all your factories, you are in deep, deep trouble.
now for the more interesting ones, top left. The government doesn't care lax policy, but we get the revolutionary tech.
This is the tech leap and laissez-faire world. The government isn't helping, but the technology is so good that EVs win anyway.
They win on their own merit.
Exactly. They're just better products, they're faster, cheaper to run, and way cooler. The market drives the change here, not the law.
And finally, the really tricky one, bottom right. Aggressive policy, but stagnant tech.
This is the green without tech revolution world, and this is a nightmare world for a manufacturer. because the government forces people to buy EVs, but the cars,
Mm-hmm.
they just aren't very good. They're expensive, they're heavy, they have short range.
So this leads to consumer anger.
Massive consumer anger.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a black market for old gas cars springs up. As a company, you have huge compliance costs, but you have zero consumer enthusiasm.
See, that is a fascinating world to imagine. It's so messy. It's not just EVs win or EVs lose.
No.
It's EVs win, but everyone is miserable about it.
And that is the whole point of step 4, which is developing narratives. You have to flesh out these worlds. You write the story. You give it a name. You describe the consumer.
And then, and this is the most important part, you ask the big question.
What strategy works in all of them, or at least doesn't fail catastrophically in any of them?
The no-regret moves.
Exactly. You're looking for a strategy that is robust across multiple futures. Let's bring it back to the Texas Technology Task Force that's mentioned in the text.
They did this for autonomous vehicles.
They did this exact exercise for connected and automated vehicles, or CAVs. They looked at scenarios ranging from utopian seamless integration
Where everything works perfectly.
to infrastructure failure, where the roads can't handle the new tech.
So what was a no-regret move for them? What works in the utopia and in the failure scenario?
Investing in highway sensors and digital infrastructure. Think about it.
Yeah.
If the cars become fully self-driving, they need that data from the road to operate safely.
Makes sense.
If the cars are just smart with advanced driver assist, they still use that data to improve safety.
Right.
And even if we just have human drivers for the next 30 years, the city can use that same sensor data to time traffic lights better and manage congestion.
So it's a good investment in any of the 4 quadrants.
It's a win-win-win. It's such a powerful concept. You aren't gambling on one specific future.
You are investing in the foundation that supports all of them.
Precisely. You stop trying to guess the winner of the race, and you start building the stadium that the race will be run in.
I like that. Okay, so that's scenario planning. That deals with the big what ifs.
The uncertainties.
But sometimes we do have data. Sometimes we can see a line on a chart and it looks pretty reliable. That brings us to section 3. Trend analysis, the telescope.
Right. If scenario planning is the flight simulator for uncertainty, trend analysis is the math you do when things seem certain.
The telescope.
The telescope. You look at historical data, you see a clear pattern, and you extrapolate it forward into the future.
And the classic example here is Moore's Law. I feel like every technology and business student hears this on day one.
Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel. Back in 1965, he was just writing a paper, and he noticed a pattern.
What was it?
The number of transistors you could fit on a dense integrated circuit was doubling roughly every 2 years.
Which basically means computers get twice as powerful or half as expensive or half as small every 2 years. And he predicted this would continue.
He did. And for 50 years, he was astonishingly right. It became the heartbeat of the digital revolution.
But here's the secret that the chapter points out, which I found fascinating.
What's that?
Moore's law wasn't really a law of physics. It wasn't like gravity.
No, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's a bold claim. What do you mean by that?
The entire semiconductor industry, Intel, AMD, all the chip fabricators, they used Moore's law as a shared roadmap.
So they all agreed to it.
They sat down in their planning meetings and said, okay, the law says we need to be at X processing speed by 1990.
So they made it happen.
They coordinated their multi-billion-dollar R&D budgets, their supply chains, their engineering goals, all to make sure they hit that doubling mark on schedule. They forced the trend to come true because everyone in the industry expected it to.
So the trend itself became the target.
Exactly. And it worked wonders for decades.
But.
And there is always a but in Foresight. Trends are dangerous things.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This is the trap of extrapolation.
Humans love linear thinking. We're just hardwired for it. If I gave you a puppy that grew exactly 1 pound a week for its first 10 weeks, and I asked you how much it would weigh in 5 years, and you just extrapolated that straight line.
You'd have a puppy the size of a dinosaur, a Clifford the Big Red Dog situation.
Exactly. Trends break. They hit limits. Biology has limits. Technology has the limits of physics. We call this predictable pattern the S-curve.
Right.
Things start slow, then they go through a period of rapid exponential growth. That's the steep part of the S. And then they saturate and plateau.
And knowing where you are on that curve is critical.
It's everything. Are you in the early adoption phase, the rapid growth phase, or are you about to hit the ceiling?
The text gives a really stark example of a trend breaker, something that looked like it was going to go up forever and then just snapped.
Ride sharing.
Uber and Lyft, look at the chart of their adoption pre-2020. It was a rocket ship, straight up and to the right.
If you were a forecaster in 2019, just looking in your rearview mirror, you'd say, by 2025, personal car ownership will be dead. Everyone will just Uber everywhere.
And then 2020 happened.
COVID-19. The trend didn't just bend. It fell off a cliff. Ridership dropped to near zero almost overnight.
The environment changed completely.
The fundamental inertia of the trend was shattered by an external shock.
So trend analysis is useful, but it has this massive blind spot. It assumes the future is just more of the past.
It can create a false sense of security, which leads to this other huge challenge, distinguishing between signal and noise.
This sounds like the hardest part of the job.
It is. This is the art of horizon scanning. If your company's sales dip for one quarter, is that just noise? A bad rainy season? A temporary shipping delay?
Or is it a signal, a permanent fundamental shift in consumer behavior?
Like, did people stop buying your soda because it rained a lot in June? Or because everyone on TikTok suddenly decided that sugar is poison?
One of those is a blip. The other is an existential threat to your business.
Exactly. Trend analysis can tell you what is happening with the numbers, but it often fails to tell you why it's happening or, more importantly, when it's going to stop.
Okay, so we have the flight simulator scenarios to handle the big uncertainties. We have the telescope trends to track the stuff that seems linear. Now we need to look at the web. Section 4, systems thinking.
This is my personal favorite.
Of course it is.
Wow.
This is the deep, nerdy stuff.
It absolutely is. This is the wicked problem solver.
What's a wicked problem?
A wicked problem is a problem that is so complex and interconnected that trying to solve one part of it often makes another part worse. And systems thinking is the tool for that. It's about understanding the whole, not just the individual parts. It's about seeing the web of interconnected impacts.
Because technology does not exist in a vacuum.
It never does. It exists in a society, in an economy, in an ecosystem.
Let's go back to the ride-sharing example because the text calls this the ride-sharing paradox. I love a good paradox.
This is a perfect example of linear thinking versus systems thinking.
Okay, lay out the linear thinking for me.
Linear thinking says, Step 1, make rides cheap and easy to get with an app. Step 2, fewer people will need to own their own cars. Step 3, therefore, there will be less traffic.
Makes sense on paper. Seems very logical. A to B to C.
But the system's reality involves human behavior and economics and feedback loops. It's much messier.
So what actually happened?
Well, first, those cheap rides meant that people who used to take the bus or the subway said, hey, for just $2 more, I can get a private car.
So they switched from high-capacity mass transit to single-occupancy card.
Right. And second, you have a phenomenon called deadheading.
Deadheading, that sounds like something you do to flowers.
It's the industry term for when a driver is cruising around empty, waiting for the app to ping with a new ride.
So they were driving, taking up road space, burning fuel, but moving zero people.
Exactly. So you actually put more cars on the road to service the same number of people. The system became less efficient.
And the result in many major cities like San Francisco and New York,
The result was that ride-sharing actually increased congestion. It made traffic worse.
that is a rebound effect, right?
Yeah.
A classic unintended consequence.
It's the perfect example. You solved one problem, personal convenience, and in doing so, you created a feedback loop that made the original problem, traffic, even worse.
And it gets even worse than that, doesn't it?
It does. Because if everyone stops taking the bus system loses revenue. If the bus loses revenue, they have to cut service. If they cut service, then even more people are forced to take cars.
It's a downward spiral, a death spiral for public transit.
That's systems thinking, seeing those connections.
The text also brings up smart cities and the Internet of Things, or IoT. Let's imagine a city deploying sensors everywhere to optimize traffic lights. This seems like a pure win.
On the surface, it sounds great. The light turns green just as you approach. We clear the traffic in neighborhood A.
But a systems thinker asks,
A systems thinker asks, if I clear the traffic jam in neighborhood A, where does it go?
it just moves to neighborhood B. You're just displacing the blockage.
You might be. Or, let's look at the data layer. Who owns all the data from those city sensors?
Is it the city? Is it a private tech company that installed them?
And what are the cybersecurity risks? If a hacker can get into the traffic light grid like in the movie The Italian Job can, they shut down the entire city.
These are the second and third order effects.
Yes, the first order effect is easy. Traffic moves faster. That's what you intended.
But the second order effect,
Might be that more people decide to drive because traffic is moving faster, which eventually leads back to congestion.
in the third order effect.
Could be that public transit goes bankrupt, air pollution increases, and the entire city becomes vulnerable to a single point of cyber terrorism. You have to see the whole elephant, not just its trunk.
So how do we put this all together? We have these three powerful tools. How do they fit?
They work together as a triad. You need all three.
Okay.
Trends give you the baseline. That's your business as usual view. This is what's likely to happen if nothing weird occurs.
Then you bring in scenarios.
Scenarios explore the uncertainties. They prepare you for the weird stuff. They are your what-if engine.
And finally, you layer on systems thinking.
Systems thinking checks for the unintended consequences. It's the oops, did we just break something else factor.
So you're seeing the forest, the ecosystem, and not just the trees, the individual technologies.
Precisely. If you only look at the technology in isolation, you will always miss the revolution.
All right, let's bring this down to earth. We have a lot of students listening. They have projects due. They have their own careers to plan. Section 5 is all about practical application.
This isn't just for CEOs of oil companies. This is a toolkit for you.
The text outlines a workshop simulation. Let's assume a listener wants to try this out. Let's do it right now, actually. Let's role play it. I'll be the student.
Okay, sounds good. Grab a metaphorical notebook. Step 1, select a tech. Pick something emerging and interesting.
Okay. Let's go with augmented reality glasses. Not the big, bulky headsets, but the ones that are supposed to look like normal glasses.
Great choice. Step 2, trend research. What does the telescope say? What are the current trends?
Well, looking at the data, components are getting smaller and more powerful. Batteries are slowly getting better. Big companies like Apple and Meta are spending billions on R&D.
So the trend line points towards.
Smaller, cheaper, better. The baseline forecast says they are coming eventually.
Okay, so they're on the horizon. Now, step 3, identify uncertainties. What could derail this? What are the two biggest unknowns?
Okay, one would have to be social acceptance. I mean, do people actually want to wear cameras on their face all day?
The Google Glass backlash comes to mind.
Exactly. People hated being recorded, so that's a huge uncertainty. The second one, maybe regulation.
How so?
Will governments step in and ban facial recognition in public spaces? Will there be privacy laws that make them unworkable?
Perfect. Those are both high impact and high uncertainty. So now, step 4, build scenarios.
Yeah.
Let's make the 2x2 matrix. Let's put social acceptance on the horizontal axis and regulation on the vertical. So, top right quadrant is high acceptance and loose regulation. What do you call that world?
That's the augmented world. Everyone wears them. We see data floating over people's heads. The internet isn't in our pocket. It's in front of our eyes.
Okay, now the opposite. Bottom left, low acceptance, strict regulation.
I'd call that the glass hole return. The technology exists, but it's socially unacceptable. If you wear them in public, you get kicked out of bars. They just become a niche tool for surgeons or factory mechanics, not for regular people.
Good. Now, step 5, systems map. Let's say the augmented world happens. What are the ripple effects? The second and third order consequences?
Well, personal privacy as we know it is probably dead. But maybe we don't need street signs anymore. Maybe we don't need screens on our phones or TVs.
The entire advertising industry changes completely.
Oh, totally. Ads just pop up in 3D on the sidewalk as you walk past a store.
Okay, and finally, step 6, strategy. You are a student about to graduate. What is a no-regret move for you? What skill is valuable in the augmented world and in the glass hole return?
That's tough. Well, in both worlds, the content for the glasses still needs to be created, so maybe 3D modeling.
Bingo. Whether AR takes over the world or just stays in the engineering lab, learning a skill like 3D spatial design or how to use engines like Unity or Unreal is a winning move.
So if AR wins big, I'm set. If it stays niche, I can still get a great job.
If AR wins, you're a billionaire creative director. If AR stays niche, you have a high-paying, specialized job working for the industries that use it. You future-proofed yourself. You win either way.
And that brings us right to career relevance.
This is so crucial. You can use this exact process for your own life. If you see the AI trends, and we all see them, you just ignore them.
That's linear thinking. That's assuming your job today will exist in the same form tomorrow.
Or do you use Foresight to future-proof your skills?
So if you build a scenario where AI writes all the basic code and you are a computer science student, what is your value?
Maybe your value shifts from writing code to system architecture, or AI ethics, or managing the human teams that work with the AI. You prepare for the scenario where your current hard skill becomes a commodity.
You become robust rather than just trying to be right.
Exactly. Don't try to predict if you'll get laid off in 5 years. Prepare yourself so that if the entire industry shifts, you're the one riding the wave, not the one drowning in it.
Wow. Okay, let's recap this deep dive. We have covered a lot of ground. We started on a rooftop in Dallas looking for flying taxis and realizing the administrative nightmare they represent.
Then we traveled back to 1973 to sit in the boardroom with Shell and watch them navigate the oil crisis while everyone else panicked because they were only looking in the rearview mirror.
We dissected Moore's law and realized it was less a law of physics and more of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we looked at how trends can break like Uber during the pandemic, teaching us the difference between signal and noise.
And we mapped the complex web of city traffic to understand that sometimes making things better in one place, like offering cheap rides, can actually make them worse overall, like creating more traffic. That's the wicked problem.
And the key takeaway from all of this,
The future isn't something that just happens to you. It is something you prepare for.
that is the whole mindset shift in a nutshell.
And just remember, being right is lucky. Being ready is strategic.
Next time on our deep dive, we are turning the page to Chapter 11, Technology Assessment and Strategic Decision-Making.
So we've looked at the possible futures. Now, how do we make the hard choices today? How do we decide which technology to invest in and which one to skip? That's what's next.
Do not miss it. And hey, one more time check the description below. We have the link to the PDF of the chapter and that report from the Texas Technology Task Force. It is fascinating reading.
It really is. Highly recommended.
And please hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with your fellow Tarleton business students. Let's get everyone future ready.
It's the best investment you can make in your own career.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. A provocation, if you will.
Okay.
Think about one technology you rely on every single day. Maybe it's your smartphone, maybe it's the GPS in your car, maybe it's the internet itself. If that technology suddenly accelerated, became 100 times more powerful overnight, or if it completely disappeared tomorrow, would you be ready?
Would your job still exist? Would your daily routine completely collapse?
Run that scenario in your head.
Because that's the start of Foresight.
That's a wrap on this episode of Emerging Technologies and Innovation Strategy. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, every disruption starts with curiosity. Until next time, stay ahead of the curve.